Jr., Fort Belknap, Councilwoman Patricia Ironcloud, Fort Peck, President Renalea Pena, Northern Cheyenne. We will begin tonight's town hall discussion with a prayer from Representative Sharon Paraguay.
Jade, thank you. I'll say the prayer in my language, which is Crow. So everybody pray with me. Agbaritiagade shilage shina apahish kalachidi wawagahu hilain iga kajesha hilene shagis jitbachesh kukala hilenagi with bagish kukala gold hada. Nawale ne hiagadim hinawish bajetos kunapa hidela. Ela kilage shinawale ne hiagadam bihu kodaidia wale agis jisit bashesh bihu kodaide on chush bahu. Ela bale is seridikyo baritiagadin hilagesh. Ama bawshitak amawish kusush bachko kodaidish inin nishoje mazal hilagesh bawalaulik. Ela gali itche awakush bale ne ledak. Ela chiwi hukoi iwat kawaka chi. Kalachi majawak pagbawas at bawak kamari gipodu kuko wagalu. Elaga hilelesh aniwak besh yoko vidikyo. Absala kadesh tachesh kun yoko vidikyo aniwak besh. Oleyes sevidikyo. Elagilagesh kukala alashevish kuk. Itche awakula kuko wagalu bihu kodaidish tachesh. This says a hogashi among. Aho.
Thank you.
Yes. We will hear some remarks from Governor Steve Bullock.
Thanks, Jade, and thanks, Representative, for opening with a prayer. Look, I know it's been incredibly difficult and long and often uncertain handful of months. I'm glad that we can gather in this way and gather on this day. That there certainly is no doubt that Montana, the fabric of our state, is so deeply woven with the contributions of our First Nations people, and that's our educational system, our sacred lands, our representative democracy, and so much more. And today we recognize and pay homage to the Indigenous communities and culture that certainly has also been damaged at times throughout history due to historical injustices. And as we've worked together over the years, both as your governor and as your next senator, I'm committed to tackling the existing health and economic disparities in our Native communities. I think of, after 8 years, the things that we can celebrate together, being the first state in the country to actually use state dollars for language preservation, expanding health coverage through Medicaid expansion to over 15,000 Native Americans in Montana. But even with Medicaid expansion overall, it gave opportunities for the Indian Health Services to go from life and limb to actually preventative care. Or at the discussions of our tribal health officers, starting the Office of American Indian Health, or working with President Work as we got the CHAP program through last session. We worked on educational opportunities. We were the first state in the country to create an apprenticeship program for our Native students at our tribal colleges. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't matter if you're in Pablo or Butte, you should be able to climb that ladder of higher education. We finally got the tribal colleges actually working more closely with the border regions. Mm-hmm. I think of the work that you all did and we all did collectively to begin to combat the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And knowing that so much we've done, but still there's so much more to do. And on Wednesday, I get to meet with tribal leaders from all of the 8 tribal nations, like I do every year. But this time, we'll also raise and fly permanently the flags of our tribal nations in front of our state capitol. And look, no Native American should ever feel like they should walk through the back door of our capital, and their seats right at the table like every one of us. And I think this is one more testament to what we're about to see. Together, we have been able to accomplish a lot. while respecting also the government-to-government relationships that are so important. But we also know that there's so much more to do. And look, we're, I think, 21, 22 days from an election, and I truly do believe if Washington worked more like Montana, we'd all be better off. But it's been stuck in far too often political gridlock, and I don't think that Senator Daines has been part of that solution along the way. I think the way that we came together to make sure that people had coverage through Medicaid expansion and made sure that more than just that, our rural hospitals had that lifeline. That the senators time and time again voted now 5 times to reverse those gains and also wipe out coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. Or as we have worked with each of your governments through this pandemic, and that's either providing testing opportunities or addressing what might be the challenges, recognize that Indian country in part was an afterthought of the CARES Act. Initially, they were saying, and the senator was saying, let's get this through, and there would have been no money for our tribes. Or as we tried to make sure to both have a good business climate, a tax climate, and increasing funding for Native businesses, which we can talk about as well. What we've seen over the last 3 years is a tax cut where the wealthiest got, by far, most of the gain, and our kids and grandkids got about $30 trillion of debt. I think every one of us deserves a senator who's going to put our best interests, not corporate interests, first in mind. And in these uncertain times, Montana really needs a leader who's certain who they're working for, and I'll never forget that. And you all know, because you live it every single day, there's so much more that we need to be doing. We need to be fully funding the Indian health services, increasing access to affordable care, addressing the long-time systemic health disparities. We need to be investing in mental health, including the preventative efforts. We have to actually increase funding for Bureau of Indian Affairs, law enforcement. We need to increase the number of tribal veteran service officers to make sure we're keeping our promise to Native veterans. We need to be working more to create affordable housing, more good-paying jobs in Indian country. We need to protect our air, our water, our public lands from polluters, and ensure that the federal government actually lives up to both its trust obligations and its government relationships. That's part of my vision for what we can get done in Washington with better representation that at the end of the day prioritizes our needs. So it's an honor to be with you all this evening and on this day where finally our legislature recognized it, I guess it was in 2019 as Indigenous Peoples Day, and looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, all right. Chairman Davis, do you have a question for Governor Bullock?
Yes, I do. And thank you for this opportunity, Governor. Look forward to the 21 days, like you said, and hopefully the elections will go smooth. We don't have a bunch of people toting guns at us, but thank you for stepping out forward and rising to the occasion to meet this challenge and work on behalf of all of Montanans. So, Governor Bullock, in your great statement there, you mentioned the disparities that we often face in the health service in the people throughout the state of Montana and the nation with the endemic underfunding of IHS at only 40% of the need. And so as you go forward as a senator, I ask this question. How will you assure that all Americans are equal under the law, especially us Indians who are more prone to economic discrimination, health disparities, political inequalities, and taxation limitations as a government?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Davis. And one of the things that really struck me when I first took office as governor, I put together a health improvement plan for our entire state, saying how do we actually increase health opportunities and decrease health disparities. And what was so striking to me in doing that I learned if you were Native American in Montana, on average, you're going to live 20 years less. And that is something that when we talk about making sure that you're equal under the law, you're not ever going to be equal under the law if you start in a position of a lack of equality. And we've looked at that from the perspective then of saying, well, part of this is healthcare. That's why we did an Office of American Indian Health. That's why we worked so closely with the tribal governments in getting Medicaid expansion through. But part of it's economic. So we've made targeted programs for business development and recognizing that there are different challenges with a business in tribal country. Like as an example, when we put together, and I think that was the first in the nation, the Native Collateral Support. If land's held in trust, you don't always have money. So we took the state dollars. I worked with then Senator Stuart Paragoy on the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. And also recognizing that some of the health disparities are, look, we lose more of our Native American brothers and sisters due to suicide. So targeting money directly to that. And I think that that's where we have to begin with the premise, Chairman Davis, is that we have to make sure Americans are equal under the law. But if you do actually begin at a place without equality, you have to address both the health, the housing, and the economic with targeted programs specifically to our tribal nations and our First Americans to make sure that the notion of equality isn't just an empty statement, because we know that we still haven't gotten there yet, for sure.
Thank you very much for the good answer, Governor.
Thank you, Chairman. Jade, is it back to you?
I think so.
Oh, yes. Now we'll bring it to Representative Stuart Paragoy to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sukas. Just like Chairman Davis had said earlier, Governor Bullock, my best wishes to you. We certainly want to see you in Congress representing us for all the good work that you have done with the American Indian Caucus on behalf of Indian Country in Montana. And my question particularly is about Medicaid expansion. We know that it's been critical to Indian Country, and it's under and actually the ACA is under fire right now with Congress. And so my question is, what do you see as the future of Medicaid and access to health care for tribal nations?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Stuart Paragoy. And also, thank you for all that you've been doing. As noted, I've had the honor of being 12 years in public office as Attorney General and as Governor. And I think you and I have served the same amount of time in public office.
Yes.
But it is so essential. And look, even before this, there were efforts to take Medicaid and say, well, let's just make it a block grant program. Let's cut the funding along the way, which would have made it just shrink by attrition. But a week after this election, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to be hearing a case that would overturn the Affordable Care Act. That would strip away coverage for all those and allow insurance companies to discriminate against those with pre-existing conditions like cancer or diabetes. But it would also eliminate Medicaid expansion, which really has been, you look at in Montana, it's been a lifesaver for us, literally in the 90,000 folks that have been covered, but also in the economic opportunity. So we're actually then keeping our rural hospitals open, but also then not just making it about going to the emergency room where costs are most expensive, but actually having preventative care. So I'll fight tooth and nail to preserve that, because it is also, as you point out, I think it was at the Fort Peck Nation, as I was looking at they're opening a new health center. Well, part of the way that they could do that is finally with Medicaid, the dollars came in,
Yes.
and then Indian Health Services could actually start focusing on not just doing the life and limb. So you have my assurance that I'll do everything I can to keep Medicaid expansion, but then also build on it because look, you all know the challenges of Indian Health Services. I mean, it's far too often, like this is part of the trust responsibility, and it's understaffed and it's underfunded. And no one, based on where they live or what nation they belong to, could end up having at times what would be less than the health care that anybody else gets in this state. Medicaid expansion and building on the Affordable Care Act is so essential for our state, and it's so important for Indian country. And that's why I will fight tooth and nail to preserve it, no matter what the Supreme Court does right after the election. And I think that we've finally gotten this point, most of us, like Senator Daines, still want to get rid of it, but most of us recognize that, look, it was hard battles to get what we got. And it might have been contentious in 2015 when we first got it passed. But it's so important for not just Indian country, but all across our entire state.
Thank you, Governor Bullock.
No, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Now we shall hear from President Work.
Can you hear me okay?
Sure can, President.
Yeah. Sorry if I kind of jammed anybody up there. I switched to my iMac. I was using my iPhone, but I'm not used to this platform. I'm used to Zoom. But anyways, I just wanted to, if you kind of bear with me for a second, I got a prepared question. But first of all, I just wanted to let everyone know on the call that, you're always in my prayers. Thank you, Sharon, for the good prayer this evening, especially during the COVID that's going on right now. It's just, I always pray for you folks and the people that you represent, the different tribes and the governor and your families that we'll all, get through this together. So I'll just go ahead and jump to my question here. Governor Bullock, I appreciate you and your administration's support and commitment to strengthening the government-to-government relationship between the state of Montana and Montana tribal governments. In particular, your support for our water settlement, the Fort Belknap Indian Community Water Settlement Act of 2019, that is currently pending in both the House and the Senate. Governor, as you know, the Fort Belknap Water Compact passed the Montana legislature 19 years ago with overwhelming support. The compact passed 94-6 in the State House and 42-6 in the State Senate. Representatives for the Milk River Joint Board of Control testified in support of the compact, stating that it would serve to properly protect the Milk River irrigation system, which is the lifeblood of the irrigation in north central Montana. So my question for you, Governor Bullock, is that as the next senator for the state of Montana, with the FBIC Water Settlement Act of 2019 being one of the 2 Indian water settlements left to finalize here in Montana, what can you do differently than your opponent to get the water settlements to the finish line? Thank you.
Yeah, and President Work, first also thank you, because I know that throughout your term you've been working on this and doing it in a way that brings more people together. That you've made it so, it's so critical to the Fort Belknap Indian community, but it's so critical to everyone up there. And it matters so much. And I've drawn inspiration time and time again by the way that you've approached this. And to me, it is more than disappointing. It's abysmal that here this is that passed the state a long time ago, and that you don't have 3 champions back in D.C. saying every single day it's time to get this compact funded and settled. Fort Belknap Indian community should not be waiting this long. And you have my pledge that whoever the administration is, I'll point out not just the commitment and the promise and not just the actions of our state legislature, but I'll point out the fact that there's no excuse for this not to get completed. And I'll stand by your side and with you on that. Because, as I said at the beginning, you have been one of the inspirations to me where you should be frustrated. And everybody in the Fort Belknap Indian community should be frustrated. Because you deserve 3 strong advocates helping educate the rest of the Senate and the rest of Congress about getting this done. And I will do my level best in the first year to get this done. And I'll work with you every step of the way.
Thank you, Governor.
No, thank you.
Yes, and we'll also hear from Patricia Ironcloud, Councilwoman, for a question.
Governor Bullock, I love you. All is from the tribe.
How are you doing? I haven't seen you in too long.
The last full board meeting, we all voted together to support you. You're going to get it, okay?
Oh, thank you.
And we're proud of you. We're very proud of you. I've been working because I've been sitting on the MMIP for the state of Canada. We'd like to know how is that going to continue if the funding runs out, because that's what we're really concerned with, because even in DC there's a lot of monies there for VOCA and for VAWA, and we'd like to know what your ideas are for that, because in Indian country we have a lot of murdered missing Indigenous people, and we'd like to know where they're at, and we'd like to have funds to have them protected as well. So what is your ideas on that, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you, Patricia. So 2 different things. First of all, right, a budget is always sort of a reflection of the priorities and values we have as a community and as a people. So on the state side of things, as I prepare my final budget to hand over, all of the work that we did in the state legislature, that will be proposed to be funded. But at the federal level, I think that you actually hit the sort of nail on the head when we talk about things like VAWA, right? The Violence Against Women's Act was so essential.
Yes.
And look, this was quite a long time ago. And there's at times funding struggles, but the recognition, and it's only been, unfortunately, like in your lives, you've seen it for decades, but finally there's a consciousness of what this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women are. And it was so great seeing at our state legislature how we could get beyond sort of the partisanship. Now at the federal level, what we've got to do is get beyond, or maybe even further educate, because statements mean nothing if there's not money behind them. And the work that we can do requires money in Indian country. So that one day we will be on this call and say this notion of missing and murdered Indigenous women, or the significant disparities that we see, no longer exist. So I look forward to working with you, Patricia, and others to say, what is the adequacy of funding, and make sure that your voices are heard, and that voice is heard all throughout Washington, D.C.
support you when you get in. I'll come see you.
Thank you. Jade, back to you. Jade might be frozen.
Might be.
It might be President Whiteman Pena.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam President.
See you.
Good seeing you too.
The new norm, we're not being able to meet in public, in person like we would have, but this is a new norm.
Mhm.
And welcome everyone that's on tonight. And I would like to start with, I would like to ask, what will you do in the Senate to provide more resources for tribal law enforcement agencies in Indian country? Because as you know, we have a great shortage, and especially with this pandemic, it has caused lawless land, and background checks are take so long
We just
to
lost.
get complete, and it leaves short. Hello.
Yes.
We're here.
Yeah, we lost you for a
Hello?
second, but absolutely, President. It was striking to me, and I was thinking about this because you and I had this conversation. It must have been about a month ago. And then I had a conversation with President Work about the challenges of chronic BIA underfunding and also then getting peace officers through the process and working. And I thought back to two different things. One, when I was Attorney General, where we started actually having our tribal law enforcement not have to go down to New Mexico, but could be trained at the Law Enforcement Academy in Helena. But then I also thought about one of President Obama's efforts where he said, okay, we're going to choose, and at the time it's like just 6 tribal nations around the country and have an enhanced law enforcement presence. And that was Rocky Boys was the one in Montana that was chosen. But that was a decade ago. And the struggles that you're having continue to exist. So it is twofold. It really is working not just with the Northern Cheyenne, but all our tribal nations to first and foremost make sure that the land that is covered is immense. And the number of officers slotted for Indian country through the BIA is continuously inadequate. And it has been not just during the pandemic, but it has been all the time that I've been in office, and Washington, D.C. hasn't done much. So both making sure the funding is there and then also then working on to make it a more expedient and efficient hiring process so tribes aren't left with limited law enforcement for the safety and for things like MMIW and other crimes. We need to make sure to actually provide the base funding and the pipeline of officers along the way. There's no question when we talk about trust responsibilities that the federal government has fallen short here.
Yes. So we can open it up for a discussion between all of the guests. If you have any
Somebody
questions.
froze.
Yeah. I'll just go ahead and jump in. So we've been talking about the Medicaid expansion, and I think there was the other issue, Governor, you'll be in position with you being in Congress The other issue that we faced during the COVID, I guess the COVID trials, as I'll call them, is the fact that when tribal governments had to begin to close their borders, and we saw the interaction with our neighbors to the east in terms of how that played out, where trying to reopen the borders when it was all surely public safety issues, and then it came down to the fact that it's about the sovereignty. And so, how would you? I know that with your 12 years in Montana, from attorney general to governor, that you've worked with the tribes on a government to government relationship, and that you've been very good about. You've had a good track record on ensuring the sovereignty of the Indian tribes here within Montana. So, how would you carry out that viewpoint? Because, as always, we have to educate people that are not aware of where the government to government relationship comes from. So, how would you? It'll be a challenge, but how would you carry that out?
Yeah, and Representative Stuart Paraguay, I have, because of people like you and others, learned so much in this last 12 years about what a government-to-government relationship means. And it's more than, the annual consultation. It should actually began with a foundation of respect, and it should be actually that regular dialogue and discussions about how we can both succeed, and as you all, and as tribal leaders, fight for the betterment of your people, recognizing that wherever you are, I as a governor or as a senator, that I'm failing if I'm not along with you every single step of the way. And as you look even through this COVID-19, as I put together statewide directives, in each one of those press conferences or avails, I also talked about some of our tribal governments are going to be more restrictive, and we must honor those restrictions. And we must honor that government decision, the best way to keep their people safe and healthy. And I think that exactly right from where you frame this is like, South Dakota certainly took a completely different approach.
Yeah, they did.
And it's unfortunate in some ways that in 2020 that we're still having to continue to educate both at the state level and at the federal level of what sovereignty means, and also what trust responsibility can mean as well. So I'll take those lessons of both what we've been able to do in collaboration through COVID. When I'm successful, I will be the only member of Congress that actually also had that dubious distinction of running a state's efforts through the pandemic and recognizing where Washington, D.C. has fallen short. And we do need more national leadership overall when it comes to COVID-19. But then we also need to have the respect for, as government, say we need to be more restrictive and expect people to follow those restrictions along the way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions out there that you would like to address Governor Bullock?
Governor Bullock. Governor, you set me on a task a few years ago. I sat on the Board of Pardons and Parole for the state of Montana. And I saw the disparity there of the Native men and women per capita wise higher than any other people on this earth. So as I looked into it for those 2 years, I loved being on there. I really did. I loved being on there. But the disparity came when they the federal judges, the state judges, it's very hard there, and you would see these gentlemen ladies in front of us.
Patricia, we're only getting about every fifth word.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Hear me now?
sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep.
Hello.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Is it better now?
Oh, it sure is. Now you sound like you're right next door.
Oh, good. I just want you to know I really love working on the Board of Pardons and Parole. That was a wonderful experience for me. The task that I would like to see in the state of Montana is it would start in the federal judges, basically, if they understood that we as a tribe, because we go under that the federal law, that a lot of our people are going to prison and they're staying there longer than any other people.
Yeah.
The disparity is there. Per capita wise, we're the highest, and I see it beginning with the judges. That's what I'd like to address that. And if we could, as a people, find some kind of direction when you get into this level that you're going to be going into, you need a fresh face in Washington D.C., and you're going to be that fresh face. I really appreciate everything you've done. But that's the only thing that I see. There's a big disparity there for men and women that are sitting behind bars and sitting there longer than other people, have done less crimes. They have sit there longer term, and that has to change. That has to change, and that's one of the things that I'd like for you to look into, because they shouldn't be sitting down there for the same crime that a non-native has done, sitting there longer, 10 years, 20 years longer than a non-native, and I've seen it for myself. So, thank you, sir.
No, I appreciate that, Patricia. And I also do think that, I mean, when it comes to the judicial appointments at the federal level, that you often see that there is a lack of understanding, even about government-to-government relationships or about Indian law. And you also, frankly, have the federal judiciary is grossly unrepresentative of even, our tribal nation population along the way. So we'll look for opportunities to put more natives on the bench, but also ask them questions to recognize both the disparities that currently exist and how we get over those disparities.
Very, 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 thank you so much.
Governor Bullock, early on in our question, you talked a little bit about housing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Did I cut somebody off? I can't hear very good.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, the Nahasda Act back in 2000 authorized a formula for tribes. And unfortunately, a lot of the tribes that are, say, small, receive, that have less transportation miles than say, like the Blackfeet, they receive more funding out of the Nahasda Act than our tribe in Alaska, for example. Nothing against it, but a lot of their roads are zip lines or skidoos or planes or whatever, but they're receiving a good share. And then, like us in Montana, because of how the formula reads, we're disproportionately funded. So I'm glad that you said you would work with us to assure that funding is fair and equitable. And then you mentioned housing. I know since Reaganomics came in, 40 years ago, we saw our housing authorities really struggle with development. And we just need to see some more of that, because there's a lot of our families that reside in one household, and it's going to affect us on the voting, because a lot of those people in that household, they don't have a box number. So this is a challenge we have, and we're just talking with Alicia to see assure that our people can be, reached out so that the ballots don't get waylaid. We're really fearful of that. So all the work you've been doing that way, but so in the Senate, the funding formulas that I think they need to be looked at from and have a hearing with the tribals' participation, so that we can be assured that the formulas are a little more disproportionately just to us people out here. And then the last thing was taxation. I know you mentioned that, and that's our agreement with the state. So the next governor will work with us to assure that because right now it's disproportionately funded, because they don't count descendants or non-members that reside on the reservation that utilize all the services on the reservation, so fire protection and so forth. And there's this PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, that comes out of the Department of Interior. And a more equitable sharing of that formula we have 2 counties on our reservation, and we're not receiving really a just contribution compensation for those payment in lieu of taxes. So just as you go forward, we just kind of like to keep those issues paramount, that we can begin to get some type of just compensation for the time. It's been like 30 years since we've had this agreement, and we need to just assure that it's distributed more justly to our particular reservations in Montana, so we can utilize those funds to do what needs to be done, like every other community municipality does, is street repair, street lights, and development, and that's something we so desperately need. So we just look forward. I'm really glad you hit that on your campaign trail here with us, and so just look forward to working with you on assuring that those opportunities continue to be presented to us, and that we can sit down and visit with that. So again, we just look forward to that, and I think as we go forward, this is just such a process. But we just want thank you for all working with us all these 8 years, and the 4 as a Attorney General. We just look forward to six more robust years. So good luck, God bless, and I'm really glad you had this town hall with us. It was very beneficial for me.
No, thank you very much, Chairman Davis, and I look forward to getting to continue to work with you and all the leaders. I think, Jade, are you going to put a little pitch in?
I have a question. I mean, a comment, if I can jump in somewhere.
Oh, go ahead, President.
Okay. He talked about some of the things that I'm concerned about, because the major part of funding comes from this, and a lot of they went off the NAHASDA for this CARES Act, and instead of including all the enrolled tribal members, they only included those that were living in the reservation boundaries for the NAHASDA population. But that wasn't an up-to-date, accurate account. So we got shorted quite a few dollars in the CARES Act to accommodate, all of our almost 12,000 tribal members, because whether they're on or off the reservation, they're still counted on our enrollment rolls. So that is something that I would really like to stress, is that the proportion of how money is allocated, it should include all of the tribal members and not only just a portion. So that, so when we go with how, our housing issue is very inadequate, because just like Chairman Davis said that, or the one that spoke right before me, he said that we have multiple families living within our homes, and that's due to lack of adequate housing. So when the pandemic hit, it was hard to separate those that were positive from their household, because there were so many in there, and they self-isolated there. So it was hard to separate them from getting the whole family passing the virus.
No, that's right.
So
Yeah.
these are one of the homes that we count are the household size during this pandemic, and helping them as they were going through the process of being affected by COVID, there was like 28 people in one house. That's the largest number that we've seen. But that's because we do have inadequate housing. We haven't built houses there for a few years now, and it would be really great to see that our numbers are allocated as tribal the total tribal members, and not just what's who's living within the boundaries, because we service all our tribal members, not just those that are in the boundaries. So that is something that I would really like to see, more funding sent that way. So, but yeah, so thank you, good luck, and we shall see you at the polls.
Thanks, President Pena, and also Chair Davis. Well, all of you, but as we look at, and I think as the Chairman Davis said, like we haven't looked at these formulas in 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And it does make sense to look anew and say both the adequacy of the funding and when the formulas are, I mean, on the one hand, we have more tribal colleges, land-based tribes, than probably any other state. But we're also providing services for individuals, not just on reservations. So
Yes.
I look forward to working with you on these for sure.
Yes.
Yes, well, I think that there was no better way to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day than to spend the evening with you all. Indigenous Peoples Day is recognized by my nation, the Northern Cheyenne Nation. Recognition is a never-ending battle for us as Native Americans. It has been less than 100 years ago that the Native Americans were given the right to vote. I've celebrated that freedom since I turned 18. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to the importance of voting growing up. I have also taught my own children the severity of this matter. This year, my son, who will be 18, will be casting his first vote. And I encourage every young Native American eligible voter to get registered to vote and to make it to the polls. We need to support Governor Bullock for U.S. Senate, as he has been always a big support for Indian country. Please don't hesitate to reach out for me on this matter. I've been honored to be a part of this important conversation, and I will be praying for the safety of us all. Niaish.
Oh.
Thank you, Jade. And I'll just close with thanks and gratitude. It's interesting. So my oldest daughter, who graduated high school last year, I received a text from her early this morning, and she goes, "Could you do an executive order to make it Indigenous Peoples Day, or is there anything that you could do?" And I could tell her that we have reason to celebrate in Montana, because it doesn't take an executive order. We actually got that and much more through the legislature. But Jade's point is right in twofold. One of which is there's still so much to do. There is still so much to do. And I so look forward to working in a sovereign-to-sovereign relationship, a relationship based on trust and understanding going forward. But her other point is that our vote really is our voice. And I know that there are so many people in our tribal nations and across the state that feel like, oh, their voice doesn't matter. We need to elevate those voices, though, because it's those efforts that not only empower individuals, but also when they recognize that vote and voice, and that native vote can be so strong and heard so loud, we're actually giving every one of those individuals that weren't going to vote, we're handing them power and strength. So I would encourage over the next 21 or 22 days for you all also as tribal leaders to share that message, to share the importance of really standing up and making sure the voices are heard very loud and very strong. And I wish all of you both good health and safety, and wisdom and patience throughout this. It's a stressful time for all of us, and that's not the elections. That's the challenge of COVID. I so admire so much of what all of you are doing along the way, but wish you health and wish you strength and wish you to push on what Jade so eloquently said is that importance of that exercising of the vote does make such a big difference. So thank you all so very much for spending some time this evening.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Good luck.
God bless.
Yes. Be
God
safe.
bless you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
God bless
Thank you, everybody. You have a
Thank you,
good night.
Jade, for getting it
All right.
together. All right.